Good evening from Los Angeles. I'm Jason Johnson in for Chris Hayes. As we approach the new year, when the many legal troubles facing Donald Trump will come to a head, tonight, the ex-president has just lost access to the presidential ballot in a second state. Secretary of State from Maine ruled that, quote, Donald J. Trump is not qualified to hold the office of president under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which bars people who have engaged in insurrection from holding office. Quote, the events of January 6, 2021 were unprecedented and tragic, and the evidence here demonstrates that they occurred at the behest of and with the knowledge and support of the outgoing president. She adds, quote, I am mindful that no Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. I am also mindful, however, that no presidential candidate has ever before engaged in insurrection. The Maine ruling comes just over a week after the Colorado State Supreme Court reached the same conclusion, barring Trump from the ballot there. For now, though, Trump remains on the ballot in both states, as the Maine Secretary stayed her decision pending a court review. And in Colorado, an appeal by the state Republican Party to the United States Supreme Court similarly put the ruling on hold there. The Supreme Court has yet to announce if it will take the case, but earlier today, the plaintiffs who brought the Colorado suit asked the court to move quickly on the matter, writing, quote, this case involves issues of exceptional national importance. Colorado, along with 15 other states and territories, holds its presidential primary on Super Tuesday, March 5th. This motion seeks to expedite the court's consideration of this petition so that the important questions of Trump's eligibility can be resolved before most primary voters cast their ballots. Joining me now to discuss, Joyce Vance is a former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Alabama and is now a professor at the University of Alabama School of Law. Ellie Mistal is the Lewis Black of politics and the justice correspondent for The Nation. Both join me now. I'm very excited to have you all start off the show. Joyce, I'll start with this. I know both of you guys have probably been pouring through the actual documentation here. What are the differences, I guess, perhaps in the laws being applied or the legal assumptions theories? Are there any differences between what we're seeing out of Maine and what we saw at Colorado, or are they both basically based on the same principles?
Yeah, they are. They're based on the 14th Amendment principle of eligibility. But we do have this patchwork quilt now of different decisions in different states, which is why this will ultimately head to the Supreme Court. Look, Jason, Maine is a little bit quirky. They have a different procedure than Colorado does and than Minnesota did. They start with the Secretary of State, which is why Shenna Bellows got the first crack at this decision. It will now be appealed into Maine Superior Court. That is their trial-level state court, and then it will make its way up to the Maine Supreme Court. So this decision is far from final, but it's very well reasoned, and we see the Secretary of State in her concluding paragraph taking pains to clarify that her decision is not a political one, that it is compelled by the extraordinarily unusual legal circumstances which come with Donald Trump's candidacy following an insurrection.
Ellie, what is it going to matter, and will it matter, actually, to the Supreme Court, appellate courts, federal courts, that this decision is primarily out of a Secretary of State's office as opposed to Colorado, where it's a decision that came from judges? Is that going to matter to anyone since they're both sort of basing it off the same principles from the 14th Amendment?
I think it should matter because, and I want to be really clear about this, I would like, if she's listening, Nikki Haley to lean in and listen real close to what I'm about to say, because the Civil War was about slavery. But this right here, this, my friend, is about states' rights. That's what's actually going on here. All the Maine Secretary of State is saying is that she has the authority to protect the integrity of the Maine ballot according to the laws of Maine. That is a straight up states' rights issue, right? This is not really about the kind of larger federal concerns that some people want to bring into it. This is whether or not Maine or Colorado or Minnesota or Michigan or any of the other states have control over their ballot. As I've said many times on this show and on others, we do not have one federal election system. We have 50 federal election systems, all determined by each individual state. Now, frankly, I don't like it that way. I'd rather have just one system. But Republicans have determined and demanded that we have a 50-state solution to where every state has to have their own election rules. The Maine Secretary of State is applying Maine's election rules to the Maine ballot. Republicans should love this.
Joyce, this is something else that's sort of interesting. If everyone is going to base this sort of off the 14th Amendment, what do you see as being the future of some of these other rulings? I mean, are all the other states basically going to copy and paste everybody else's homework and then bring it to the Supreme Court and say, are you going to fail us all? How does both Colorado and Maine and now future cases where future states where this is being legislated, where this is being argued about, how do you think this is going to have an impact?
Yes, so Ellie is right when he talks about the different elections that are conducted in different states, each with their own state laws, their own procedures. There's this one little carve-out niche when it comes to qualifications for a president of the United States, which are established in various parts of the Constitution. You have to be 35, you have to be a native-born citizen. And when we get to the 14th Amendment, we learn that you also cannot have participated in an insurrection after previously taking an oath to uphold the Constitution. So because that is an area of federal eligibility and qualification, it's appropriate for the Supreme Court to step in and weigh in on the law. But the difficulty here, and Jason, this is something that you've discussed before, is less so the very clear legal dictates in the law, but the intersection of politics and law here. And the court, I think, will implicitly have to make a decision about whether they're willing to run the risk of following the strict letter of the law, which this Supreme Court is on record as saying it must do when it's unambiguous, or whether there are concerns about how Americans will react and their ability to accept the results if a candidate is removed from the ballot rather than letting the voters make the choice.
Now, Ellie, I want to take this to you because this is something that I've talked about a lot, and philosophically it matters to me. Generally speaking, I think that the final decision as to whether somebody should be in office should be decided by the voters. The only time I can imagine that this shouldn't be a decision placed in the hand of the voters is when the person who they're potentially voting on has made it a point to say, I will not respect the results of any election and I will attempt to rig them. At what point does that become something that the Supreme Court has to answer? Because whether or not Donald Trump has been convicted of insurrection, whether or not we have any sort of legal examples, whether he's gone to jail, whether he's been in an orange jumper or something like that, the man has said very clearly, I won't respect any result that's not the way I want it to. Shouldn't that play a role in how quickly the court gets to this?
Yeah, look, if you can't defend yourself from a person who tried to overthrow your government, then what good is the rule of law? Like, that's really where we're at here. I totally agree with you kind of philosophically, philosophy-wise. We want elections to matter. We want democracy to work. And it is weird. It is tricky. It is squeamish. It is uncomfortable to remove a democratic choice from the voters in the name of saving democracy. I understand that tension, and I have to live with that tension. But if we're looking at protecting democracy, then certainly we have to look at protecting ourselves from people who try to overthrow that democracy. Let us not forget that in recent world history and general world history, most dictators are elected the first time, right? Most dictators have some kind of election go their way the first time. It's what happens when there tries to be a future election that the dictators show their true colors, right? And here, right. Trump showed his true colors as soon as he lost an election, and we can assume that he will do it again. And that's why we have to take the extraordinary measure provided for, as Joyce pointed out, provided for right. in the Constitution for this exact problem.
I figure if a DUI can disqualify you for driving from Uber, I don't see how an insurrection can't disqualify you from running for president. Joyce Vance and Ellie Mistel, thank you so much for starting us off on All In tonight.